Hello and welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and a follow-up from last week, I was able to figure out how to pitch Nickelodeon, and so I have a pitch meeting coming up with them, and I'm so excited about it. Today I'm chatting with the one and only, extremely popular webcomic artist, New York Times bestselling author, and recent director of a number of episodes for FXX's Cake series, Reza Farazmand, or better known as the creator of Poorly Drawn Lines, which has over 2 million followers on Instagram and nearly 300,000 followers on Twitter. And I have no idea how much his website traffic is because I don't have access to that information, but my guess is that it's probably pretty high. Now, in our chat, Reza's going to share how he created Poorly Drawn Lines in the first place, then scrambled to do everything in his power to make a living wage from it, to the point that it became an animated series, which I think is just so cool. So he's going to share how he's been able to support himself and do incredible things purely by creating a career out of his art. So without further ado, let's jump in. Hi, Reza. How are you doing? Thanks for coming on the podcast.
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat because you've had such an interesting career journey. And, you know, we're talking about animation, but you started as like a webcomic dude back for over a decade now. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Tell me how that got started, and also, you know, how did you transition to doing this full time as just, you know, webcomics?
Mm-hmm. Well, it started as like little black and white strips that I would publish occasionally in my college newspaper, and around the time that I was in college, webcomics were starting to get popular. And there were a few webcomics that I was following and was really into. Big one would be like Perry Bible Fellowship. And that kind of inspired me to take my work online where I knew it would reach a bigger audience. And I was getting a lot of positive feedback from my friends on the comics that I was making. So I just started publishing them online. My friend helped me build a website, poorlydrawnlines.com, and I just started uploading. But I was uploading pretty irregularly until like a couple of years after I graduated. And then I started thinking that I would really like to be a comedy writer full-time and write comics full-time. So I started doing Poorly Drawn Lines on a 3-comic-a-week schedule. And I think when I started doing that and started really taking it seriously is when I started getting more followers and seeing more success. And so probably between 2.5 and 3 years of doing that, I was able to transition full-time to doing webcomics as my main career.
So you were working on the side and then still making... Yeah.
Well, I had a full-time job right out of college at a media company where I was helping like edit and write articles for different websites.
Okay.
And I was doing comics on the side, like on my lunch break when I got home from work at night, and just uploading them. Like I used to upload comics between 9 p.m. and midnight because that's when I would finish them after work. And yeah, so I was really focused on doing that. And then I started selling merchandise. There were times when I would be like rolling up posters and packing merchandise at my desk at work on my lunch break and spending my whole lunch break. Basically, it was probably kind of obnoxious. I had like a big roll of tape and I was like pulling off packing tape and packing up posters.
Your coworkers are like, can you be quiet? I'm trying to eat lunch.
Yeah, exactly. You're interrupting my sandwich.
So did you reach a tipping point in like income or just confidence where you were like, yeah, I can do this full time?
I guess it was income. I wasn't making that much at my job to begin with. And it was technically a paid internship, so it didn't pay that well. And I got to the point where I was making almost as much from comics, and I had some savings in the bank, and I figured I could probably go full-time for at least 6 months before my savings ran out.
Okay.
And yeah, just see if my income started going up, like the more work that I put into it. Basically, my theory was that if I could make almost a decent living from doing it part-time, that if I started committing full-time to it, that I could probably like up my productivity. And yeah. So that ended up working out. And
assuming your savings haven't run out yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
and then what also helped is I had a friend who was starting like a online banner ad company at the time. And he like put me on his ad network, and basically I wasn't getting enough hits on my website to like attract the attention of an actual ad network. And so he kind of like gave me an in into his ad network basically, and that helps generate some income.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it was like a combination of that and then putting more work into the comics and building out my store and like selling more merchandise that really helped me go full time with it.
Interesting. I'm just curious, like, why was your comic successful? Because everybody's still making a comic, and not everybody's got like 2 million followers on Instagram and spent a decade doing this. Do you have a strategy to be like, I'm gonna go with the flow and figure out what people want and make that a success? Or were you just like, I'm gonna make what I want and see if that's a success?
I'd like to think it's mostly what I want, and I think it is mostly what I want, but I'm sure that subconsciously I'm influenced by seeing what does well or like what my fans enjoy. And so I probably have leaned into some elements of the more successful comics, and that's just become a part of my style now.
Yeah.
But I always try to do new things and make my comics unpredictable and not stick to conventions too much. So
how do you keep doing that like every single day for like 10 years though? Like that's crazy.
Yeah,
I'd run out of ideas after 10 comics and be like, I'm done.
Yeah, I've probably at this point reused ideas without even knowing it because I've done so many. But then I also feel like my style is constantly evolving, so I'm always trying new things. I guess when you are doing something for that long, you either innovate or you get bored with it.
Okay.
So I think that's what's kept me interested, is the fact that I left poorly drawn lines very open-ended. I never made it about anything specific. Just in the past few years, I've started integrating more regular characters and mini story arcs and things like that. But for the most part, it's been just free form and open-ended. So it's kind of a platform for me to make anything that I want within the realm of comics, basically. And that's what I've always done. So I guess that's what's kept it interesting and left me able to do new, unpredictable things with it.
I mean, that's just phenomenal and amazing also that you've been able to do it for so long. So you talked a little bit about how you were making money. You had ads, you had merch. How do you go from that to then, making deals with like Trip Tank or Cake, where suddenly you've got your comics are like animated in a series? Yeah. That seems like a huge jump. Like how did that happen?
Well, probably the biggest jump in my career, and when I realized I could really make a long-term career out of this, is when I got my first book deal. So I had been doing comics full-time for probably 2 years at this point. And even at that point, like 2 or 3 years into it, I was still thinking, can this actually be a long-term career? Can I do this for decades? And then an editor at Penguin Random House reached out to me and asked if I was interested in publishing a book of comics. And yeah, I went out and basically got an agent and pitched the book to Penguin. And that was my first. Like
Penguin was like, can you put your comics into a book for us? And then you had to go out and get an agent and then create a pitch to them?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So there's, to pitch to the big publishers, at least when you're a niche webcomic artist, you have to have representation. And yeah, so I don't know if that's like their official protocol, or if they were like, let's see if this guy can put together a pitch deck before we hand him a book deal. So yeah.
How do you find an agent randomly? Look, I'm sure you were like, I would be scrambling. I'd be like, holy heck, like Penguin just got in touch with me. Now I need an agent tomorrow.
Yeah, well, if I recall correctly, the editor kind of pointed me toward a couple of literary agencies that represented illustrators and comic artists. And then I also did a bunch of research, and it was actually pretty easy. I just looked up some of my favorite artists who were really successful and found out who their agents were. And then with literary agencies, you can send query letters unsolicited to literary agencies telling them what you want to do. And then if they're interested, they will represent you and help you take pitches to a publisher. So that's what I did. I sent query letters to probably 4 or 5 different literary agencies who represented some of my favorite comic artists.
Yeah.
And a few of them reached back out to me, and yeah, I ended up signing with one of them, and he's been my agent now for like my whole career.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so going back to that kind of career jump. That first book deal is what really helped make me realize that I could do this and make some actual money from it. And then once I had published a book, my first book was generated some interest and got on like the New York Times bestseller list. And so that helped me then leverage into like other projects. And then my agent put me in touch with a manager who started representing me in TV and film. And that's when I started putting together a pitch deck for a Poorly Drawn Lines animated show.
Okay, yeah, because I wanted to ask all about that, because how do you just go like, hey, television world, I have a comic and a book, because comics don't necessarily translate to animation, and there's a lot of risk involved, and you're competing against so many other things and animation studios that already excel in this. So like, what did you put together in this pitch that convinced maybe like talk about like Cake, because that's most recent, like convinced FX to take on Poorly Drawn Lines in a series of shorts?
Well, we actually put together like a 3-minute animated short, and I think it was really funny.
You and your agents?
Me and the producer that I was paired up with to work with, we put together basically like a 3-minute, I forget what you call it exactly, but it's like a
animatic.
Like an animatic with voices.
Okay.
And I still think it's hilarious. It was like really short, and it was just taken directly from a comic. We just translated a comic to animation.
So sorry, maybe I shouldn't interrupt.
No, go ahead, because I'll just.
So you found a producer to work with because you were actively trying to get an animation together.
Yeah, my manager like paired me up with a producer basically.
So you were talking to your manager and you're like, animation's an opportunity. They found a producer and they paired you up. Yeah. And then you self-invested, or the producer invested in this 3-minute?
I think we did it very cheap. It was like a friend of his who did it all. And so I don't think it cost very much. And we basically just used that as the main pitch tool. I did one pitch, like the very first pitch I did was to Comedy Central and didn't have that animatic to work with. And we got a no from them. And then we put together this animatic like over the next couple of months, and then took that out for more pitch meetings. Wow. And it was funny. I mean, I guess that partly sold it. And then I don't remember exactly. I just described the show, how I saw it. I described the characters.
Can you do like a little like 2-minute pitch to me? I'm just curious how you pitch this thing.
Things I did this like 3.5 years ago, so I don't remember anymore. But I know that I talked about like the core themes being friendship and how it was going to be a group of friends living in this surreal, outlandish world who are basically just leaning on each other to get by. And how it was going to be like grounded in this friend group, even though there was going to be a bunch of absurd, surreal aspects. And I think I remember the one executive just saying that it felt very comforting and warm.
Did they know about Poorly Drawn Lines ahead of time, or were you just like, FYI, I'm a New York Times bestseller, internet sensation?
That all went into the pitch. I mean, I said all the standard stuff like what accolades I had and how many social media followers I had, because that's important to include. So they knew I had a big social media following. They knew I had a couple of successful books out. And then it turned out that a couple of the people in the room that I was pitching to actually followed my comics already. So we're kind of aware of what I was doing. But so I think that, and I think that people who work in animation tend to like pay attention to a lot of webcomic stuff, because so many webcomic artists have jumped over to animation in like the past 10 years. So that's probably just a regular thing that animation executives do now. They pay attention to comics and webcomics. So a couple of people in the room knew about my stuff already. So I think that probably helped. And then they felt that it would translate to.
They probably had a little bit of starry eyes in there. Starry eyes? Yeah. Stars in their eyes? Okay, so what was your actual role with like Cake, for instance? Were you, director or like showrunner or like, just a writer? Or like what was your role in this?
So within Cake, all of the individual segments are kind of produced separately. So it's not like everyone's I assume there's some team higher up that like obviously is editing all of these segments together into this one cohesive show. But I think for the most part, all of the segments were kind of doing our own thing and producing them separately. So on Poorly Drawn Lines, I wrote every episode, and I was technically an executive producer and creator.
Okay. Did you also have to do like a whole like package showing like, you know, what the characters look like in various situations, what their hands look like all that stuff too? Like
For the pitch or for the character design?
The show itself, like
yeah,
like art director, etc. Like this has to look like my comic and feel like it, and the voice, like.
Yeah. So I worked with a director at Floyd County, who is the animation studio that produced the show, and they had produced Archer before, so I was like very familiar with their work and really stoked to be working with them. And so I worked closely with this director named Matt Thompson, who was kind of overseeing the show, and he knew that I wanted the show to feel like the comics, and I think a few of the animators were already fans of the comic, and so felt very invested in it, in making it feel right. And so we had, as for like the character and world design, we had like years of comics to reference back to for colors and like, yeah, color palette and overall like the flat 2D design that I use. And then I also I drew out like a sheet of character designs for all the main characters for the first couple episodes. And then the animators went in and made like 3D reference models from all angles for all the characters. Because my characters are always like, they're almost like 2D sprites in the comics. They're like forward facing and very flat. And so the animators basically brought them into like a 3D, 2D model and kind of fleshed it out. I didn't do any of the actual animation myself. That was all handled by professional animators. I just wrote the scripts and yeah, created the characters basically.
So how long was your involvement in this project, I guess, just from a timeline?
It took a while. It was like, we sold it almost 3 years ago, or a little over 3 years ago. And so it took a while it took a while for me to like write the scripts, and the scripts went through several different revisions early on. Because it was my first time really writing long form stuff. So yeah, one really cool part about the whole process is that I got a lot of notes on my scripts, and I basically learned a lot about what makes a good television story and like what makes a good long form.
Do you get notes on your comics?
I don't get notes on my comics. That's the thing. This was like a new thing for me. Yeah, I was getting notes, but I'm really glad I did, because I think the show is a lot stronger than it would have been if I had just gone off and made it myself the way I do my comics.
If you feel comfortable answering this, you know, did you have to enter the world of like option agreements and rights and like all this fancy how you're getting paid and all that stuff? Like, how did you handle that?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But fortunately, I have people who do that for me. Like,
Yay.
Yeah. So I didn't. There was lawyers and my agent, and yeah, I had people who handled all that stuff for me, and yeah. So I didn't actually have to read over any documents or use any terms like options or anything like that. I was aware that it was going on, and I knew what I wanted, and yeah, I had people that were able to navigate all those things for me.
So I guess, okay, so your career has spanned, you know, obviously the webcomic is like the bread and butter at the end of the day. And then you have merch and, you know, ads sales still, I guess, maybe, and like TV, et cetera. Like, if you're looking at, you know, creating a career in this, like where are your income streams coming from? If you also feel comfortable answering this, like, are you always kind of trying to go with the flow and with social media, and now you have Patreon and now you have all these other things to try to create all these different income streams to make this a solid, stable career? Or is it like, you know, get a book deal and that lasts for a while, and then find another opportunity and that lasts for a while, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a lot of different income streams. It used to be, for the first few years that I was doing this full time, it was ads on my website that were mostly supporting me, and with income or with merchandise being like 25%. It was like 75-25% ads to merchandise. And now with internet content transitioning over to social media, there's not banner ads on websites anymore, really, for like small content creators like me. So now it's the opposite. It's like probably 80% merchandise, like 20% ads. And then I also have a Patreon, and yeah, book deals have been good sources of income over the years. And now this animation thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it all just kind of adds up and makes for a pretty stable living.
Nice, nice. How does
But yeah, it is a lot of different income sources to juggle, basically. I do my own taxes, and it's a real
it's a
pain in the
mess.
ass. Yeah.
One day when the IRS comes and knocks on your door, they're gonna be like,
No, I'm good. I keep track of everything. I mean, I'm good.
I just mean,
at
when they do
it's just
random audits.
yeah. I'll be ready. I'll be ready with my receipts.
You'd be like, here you
For
go.
anybody who goes out and does this, the one little business tip I can say is put everything on one credit card so you keep track of it all.
Good tip.
All of your business expenses.
How does now that you're in the animation world with Cake just recently airing, et cetera, like how does this change your career, just like what you're doing with your art?
Well, I have always wanted to write comedy and write for TV. So, and then I actually really got into webcomics intending for it to be practice for animation or TV writing, and that I was going to try to spin that off into like a TV career at some point. And that just ended up happening a little bit later. Wait, hang on, I think my cats are meowing. They're just wrestling. So that ended up happening a little bit later than I originally planned, but yeah, I'm hoping to continue working in TV and film and kind of do more of that. I still love writing comics, but now that I've had the opportunity to write longer form stuff, it's very fun, and I want to continue doing that.
So okay, so like my next question is like, what's next for you? But are you going to actively try to get into writing for television then, or is it going to be trying to pitch like Poorly Drawn Lines as a full television show?
Yeah, well, I would love for Poorly Drawn Lines to become a full television show. That's probably what I would most want to do right now. Outside of that, yeah, I think I'm going to continue trying to either write for other projects or pitch my own animated projects going forward.
Nice. I guess, well, thank you for like covering how you got started, your career, how you've made it over the years, et cetera. If somebody's listening to this and they have a small webcomic or they're starting out in, that path, what has been like the number one skill, or I guess, what would you say to this person to like really develop to make a successful, stable career in this area?
Probably the most important thing for me has been consistency and consistently putting out new material. If you're trying to make it as a webcomic artist, that's probably the most important thing, is just being consistent and putting stuff out on a schedule so that people come to expect your material, basically. Yeah, so consistency and treating it like a job, kind of.
Do you ever take vacations? Like, do you ever just go away for like a month?
Not that often. And if I do, I usually will post comics like in advance, or post them to schedule them to post on their own, basically.
Yeah.
It used to be really hard for me to draw while I was traveling, because I drew traditionally for most of my career, like with pencil and paper. And so anytime I traveled, I would bring a scanner with me and set up my entire like traditional art setup with all my pencils and pens and scanner, like anywhere I went. And now I do everything on an iPad in Procreate. So it's incredible. I can like work anywhere.
Yeah. I bring Procreate with me everywhere too. It's so easy. Like I'll just be on the subway, like drawing.
I love it. It's amazing. So that's yeah.
Is there anything?
I do take breaks, but yeah, it's easy for me to continue putting out stuff even when I'm on a break.
Nice. Good to hear. Also, you're not going crazy. Is there any, I guess as we're wrapping up, are there any topics or things that you wanted to share that you think would be important for people listening?
Well, I think it's important for people to watch Cake Thursdays on FXX at 10 p.m. And yeah, also next day on FX on Hulu. What else? I mean, I think if people are trying to do what I did and go from comics to animation, I would say go for it, and go for it early. Don't like sell yourself short. Like, start making connections and talking to people in the industry early on, and start building out your body of work.
How do you make those connections and talk to people currently?
I don't know, because I didn't really do that. I have been really bad at networking my entire career, and I've pretty much relied on the fact that my comics are fairly popular and have done well to like find new opportunities in my career. But yeah, I guess like one thing that I wish I was better at and that I would encourage other people to get good at this industry is to get good at talking to people and asking questions and putting yourself out there in other ways.
Nice. Yeah. So unless you have 2 million followers, then start making some connections.
Yeah. Or just toil away in internet obscurity for years until you get a book deal. Yeah.
Some people do that. So what are the things that would take them to the next level? Maybe connections is one of those things. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
No, just check out Cake. Check out Poorly Drawn Lines. Cake is very fun. It has a lot of cool animators and studios working together to make one fun project. I think there's a lot of inspiration to be had there. And check out Poorly Drawn Lines on FX on Hulu as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Reza, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And if you're listening, of course, check out Cake on FXX, or check out Reza's work on Instagram at Poorly Drawn Lines, on Twitter at PDL Comics, or his website at poorlydrawnlines.com. And I'll include all those links in the description of this chat. Thank you so much for listening. And that's all for now. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.